is Alice in Muggerland with the man who would be Hufflepuff, Bilious McDaniels, and Alice, the mudblood who joined the Hogwarts Express.
Hey, Alice.
Hey, Bill. What's up?
I do not have a question today, but as this is the final wrap-up, I have brought along a special guest wizard.
Ooh, another wizard. That's exciting.
Yes, her job is very exciting, actually, in the wizard world. She's got a very important job. She actually has to go through and liaise with other NoMages to basically make the other NoMaj children believe that these documents are a work of fiction and they're not actually factual documents. And she has to deal with this on a regular basis as pretending to be a regular NoMaj librarian. It takes a lot of stealth and guile and chicanery to pull off the job. Not everybody can pull this job off in the wizarding world. So I want to introduce my fellow Horn Serpent alumni, Angela.
Hi, Angela.
Hi. Nice to meet you guys.
Can you put that into NoMaj terms for me?
My name?
Your job. It sounded really important, but he used a lot of words.
So what I'm known as in NoMaj terms is a librarian. So I help kids find books, lots of different kinds of books. I work for the Boston Public Library.
Very cool.
Since she has to deal with the NoMages on a regular basis about these books, and since Alice is new to the books and just finished the first volume of the documents, we're going to talk about this book as a whole to get perspective from another wizard who's also read the documents, along with the fact of Alice's first time reading the first book of this. So let's go through and talk about the book itself. What I'd like you to talk about is what is the prevalent theme that when you think about the first book of Harry Potter and the Philosopher/Sorcerer's Stone? We'll start with Alice.
So I think that the primary theme of this book, if you'll pardon the pun, is to not judge a book by its cover. Because all throughout this book, things are not exactly what they seem to be. That happens over and over again, and I think that was the primary theme to me. But I'd be curious to hear what you guys feel like the primary theme is, especially since you've had a lot more time to digest it than I have.
All right, Angela?
I actually think that's a great theme for the story, because just for the series itself, a lot of what happens is like a mistaken judgment or what we think. For example, Harry gets fixated on what he thinks or who he thinks is doing something wrong, and he misses a whole lot of other information. He just will not see past, for example, Snape or Malfoy. And I feel like, yes, like things aren't always what they appear in the series, much like in every part of literature.
Well, I think the theme is that Wizard Gold goes off and in the end buys happiness. Ha ha ha. No, but really, honestly, the theme that you guys brought up, the not judging a book by its cover, is also one of those themes that in real life about this. Me and Angela were talking about this, about how we had judged these documents by their cover, so to speak, in our own lives. So we got a delayed start reading them, just like Alice hasn't read them until the first book until just this year.
Right. That's a really good point, because when these books came out, I was in high school and I just had no interest in reading them at all. Because at the time I thought, oh, well, they're for kids, or they're just, kind of rip-offs of all these other stories that already exist, and I'm not interested. It took, literally 20 years of people I know and respect to talk about how great these books are to get me interested in reading them.
Very similar story. But it took me a while to get really into these works because they're very similar to other things I've read, and I wasn't a big fan of hype. There was a lot of it.
Yes, these books came in with a ton of hype. In fact, this was one of the cases where, to break into what a friend of mine would say, break kayfabe, I actually saw the Muggle film before looking at the documents. It turns out that Angela did the same exact thing.
Oh, that's really interesting.
It was interesting sitting behind some Muggle children talking about the film as we watched it and dissecting it. It was really good to hear.
So, Angela, speaking of Muggle children, really quick, you deal with Muggle children that read the books. What do you usually hear about when the Muggles read these books?
Usually, what happens is they're super excited, and we have any kind of chat about like what our favorite person was in the book, or what we loved best about the books. I think most Muggle children really love the ability to be able to control your environment because they don't have that. And a lot of what I do as a librarian in my Muggle life is to help kids find things that are very similar to the Harry Potter stories and give them something else to sort of read and explore that they'd love just as much. And kids really still gravitate them. So do adults and teens the same.
You know, I always thought about being an adult, going into the library, trying to consider getting the Harry Potter books. Let me ask a question, because I really don't go to the library that often. Do you guys like stash a set of the books like in the adult fiction section? So an adult that you do?
100% yes, ever since they've been coming out. We've always shelved them in both in several areas. So it's usually teen, children's, and adult books. So you can find them there. So you don't have to feel like I'm gonna go into the children's book collection and take this book from the hands of a little kid. So adults are definitely reading them, and they have been just as long as they have been. It's one of those things that adults read with their kids, and they start them off early, and they just all keep going, whether independently or together.
All I know is that as a childless person, if I was going to have to go into the children's section to pick these up, I would just feel weird. Not just because I'm taking them away from other children. It's like, yeah, I'm an adult in the children's section. Let me just grab this book and run away.
That happens more often than you think. It's okay. Read book literature. I am one of those adults.
All right, so going through with you brought up the point of what you talk about with favorite characters. Now, let's just go through and each talk about one of our favorite characters within the first book. We'll go with Angela for this one first.
One of my favorite characters, or actually my favorite character of the first book, is Neville Longbottom, because he gets no love. It's like nothing works out for him. He's trying so hard. He gets teased no matter what he does. He's just sort of the underdog, even when he is trying. And I like the part at the end when he's, standing up to his friends. Like, he finally gets some courage and shows how he's a true Gryffindor. And I love him for it. He gets so little respect in this book. It just hurts my heart.
Alice?
I liked her from the very beginning. I have to go with Professor McGonagall, because she's this very, she comes across as sort of like a prim and proper rules bound sort of person. But then she has this side of her that's just wild. Like, she's crazy about Quidditch. She will bend all of the rules to make her team better. And the fact that she can turn into a cat, that's just really cool. So, gotta be her.
For me, the favorite character is Hagrid. Because for Hagrid, he is like the ultimate protector in regards to bringing in not only bringing in Harry, but the first person that the first years have to deal with at Hogwarts is Hagrid. he's the one that's greeting them off the trains to give them their first look at Hogwarts, going through the boats to Hogwarts. So he's not only guides Harry into the magical world and is basically trying to protect him. I mean, look at how Hagrid dealt with the Dursleys, but he does this for all the first years that are coming in, basically, just to say, you got this giant lumbering dude that's like making sure everybody is safe in their boats, getting ready to get their first look, just to see like the magic of Hogwarts the first time you get the look. And he's the one that guides them to that first moment. So for me, Hagrid is probably my favorite person in this book. Now, even though notice that none of us mentioned as favorite characters the Golden Trio. So let's go through and talk about the trio themselves. What do you think each of them brings to the trio, so to speak? Let's start with, and for those that don't know who the Golden Trio is, we're talking about Harry, Hermione, and Ron. So let's start with Ron. What do you feel that Ron brings to the trio as a group? We'll go with Alice first.
Well, part of what Ron brings is really different than the other two. Is he's the only one who has any idea what to expect from being there at Hogwarts, because he has the older siblings there. His family is long established in the wizarding world, and for him, all of this stuff is kind of normal. The stuff that's not normal for him is the stuff that Hermione and Harry are really used to in the Muggle world. So he's very curious about that stuff. But as far as the Wizarding world, this is all just like day to day. I think he kind of provides a guidebook, say, for the other two, because they have no idea what to expect. So he's kind of just a not quite a calming presence, but a great resource for the other two.
Angela?
I didn't think that much about Ron, so that was actually a really great explanation, and that's very true. So I didn't think Ron initially brought too much to the table, but I do agree that he has the background, he has the history, and he does introduce Hermione and Harry to this new world. But with the exception of like a small bit of help, the fact that he can play wizard chess, I just didn't really. I've never really felt much for Ron, and it doesn't change throughout the books. It gets worse.
Oh no!
But I find him slightly whiny, but this is later. But I don't feel he brings a lot to the table. I'm sorry.
Okay, so I'm gonna go so it looks like that Alice is the moderate about Ron, and Angela is the anti-Ron. I am the pro-Ron. Ron is actually my favorite of the trio. The reason that it's not only is it that he is the guideposts for like Harry and Hermione. I mean, Hermione's smart, but she's book smart when it comes down to the wizarding world. Ron actually brings in the more the climate about what it is to even be a young wizard. He's heard so much about what's going on in the world, not only through his parents, but through his brothers and sisters and everything like that. He's the one that when it was brought up that dragons are illegal to be bred in England, I believe it was Hermione that said, well, there's no dragons in England. And he's like, of course there is. And he starts naming off dragons that are in England. He's there just to be able to bring in just how it actually is to be a wizard that you can't get in books. And it's something that both Hermione and Ron needs. And to be honest, what it also boils down to is Harry also needs a friend that isn't just looking at him because he's the famous Harry Potter. He's basically took over for Hagrid at the beginning to just explain just common wizard things that Hagrid couldn't go through and basically be bothered to explain. He explains simple things like how the candies work, how the chocolate frogs. He goes through, and when he talks about how his life is being poor, Harry was able to bond with him about that because it's someone that Harry could understand, and Ron realized, I think, right away that life outside of the wizard world isn't famous for the famous Harry Potter, so he was able to actually bond over that. So in the books themselves, I will say this, though, on the fact of Ron. Ron is the one I feel that actually grows up the most in regards to what he knows and what he finds out along the way, which I can understand Angela's perspective with that. So let's go to the next of the trio, because I know I'm going to actually save Hermione for last, because I know we have a lot about Hermione. Even though the books are Harry Potter, I know that we all have a lot to say about Hermione. So let's go with Harry. So Angela, what do you think about technically the namesake of the books, Harry?
I really like Harry. As a character, he is so, I feel like, relatable to many kids. He's a little bit mischievous. He's a little bit curious, and I was just happy that he finally gets a world where he, belongs. He can find out about his past. I think he's very clever, courageous, and he's like a true Gryffindor. He's a little bit, I know he gets into trouble, and I feel like he should be reined in sometimes, but he is that glue that holds the group together. And like without Harry, Hermione and Ron would probably never interact with each other.
All right, Alice, on Harry.
So for the first part of the book, the thing about Harry was that everything was happening to him, and he had absolutely no input in it at all. And a lot of it was sort of wish fulfillment stuff. Here he's grown up without enough attention from his adoptive family, and he's grown up very poor, even though they had more than enough to have kept good care of him. And suddenly he's wealthy and he's famous, and most of all, he's powerful. But all of this is just happening to him for the very first half of the book. As the book later progresses, we start to see more of this sort of, as Angela pointed out, this go get 'em kind of spirit that he has, act first, think later. And that's very likable. I'm curious to see how that character develops in future books, because I feel like right now he's still just kind of, grasping at who he's going to become. And it's interesting the expectations that are placed on him by everyone else in the wizarding world, whereas in the Muggle world, there were no expectations at all placed on him. They, really just wanted him to disappear, and they tried to make that happen. And, anyway, it's interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see what he becomes with all of these expectations weighing on him.
I feel a lot of the same in regards to that. While Alice was going through the previous chapters at the very beginning, basically pointing out about the fact that he has absolutely no control of his life, it brought a perspective that I didn't notice, even though I've gone through these documents multitudes of times. But that, because really, to point things out, he doesn't even get to decide on what he wants until basically the scene on the train with Malfoy and Ron. And he decided just then and there, no, Malfoy, you're a jerk. I'm siding with Ron. that was like basically like, who's your enemy gonna be on the first day of school? Is it gonna be the Weasley boy, or is it going to be the Malfoy boy? And he decided then and there that he was putting his setup with the Weasleys. But then after that, again, it was more, he was handed things. Oh, you are on a broom. Well, granted, he decided to jump onto the broom to chase Malfoy. He could have not, but he did, because he was sticking up for his fellow Gryffindor. But then he was handed this position of Seeker without even having a tryout, because McGonagall saw him fly. It's one of those things where, yeah, a lot with Harry, a lot of it does happen to him, but more and more with the books, you'll see that he does make more decisions on his own, which Hermione, almost everybody that I talk to, whenever it's talked about the three of them, almost everybody that I basically speak to says that Hermione is their favorite character. But the thing is, then they start talking about book Hermione versus movie Hermione, which that will get into the way with future Patreon-only details when we start to dive into the books. But we're going to talk about book Hermione. So, Angela, Hermione, tell me what your thoughts on her.
Hermione is probably my favorite, I have to say. I think she's the smartest person in the room, because she does so much work to prepare herself for even the unknown, for going to Hogwarts, coming from Muggle, from Muggleland with her parents. Her parents are Muggles. They have no idea what to send their daughter off into. And she's prepared. She's read all of the books. And I think that because she has such drive to succeed and excel and be the best, I think she adds a lot more to this trio. She always fills in where Harry and Ron are lacking, and they all play off each other really well. Hermione's got to be one of the coolest girls in the world, I have to say.
All right, Alice?
Yeah, it really is exciting to see a character like this, because we all know this person or were this person, this really smart, initially very rules bound, but it's just Hermione is the quintessential, girl in the front row of the classroom with her hand in the air, because she has put in the work to know everything, and she's sort of unabashedly going, going out of her way to be the teacher's pet, and you kind of have to like that she's so unapologetic about it. She wants to be the best, and it's always really cool to see a really competitive female character, because we don't get a lot of that. Most of the female characters that you find, especially in like fantasy type stories, are more of the Harry in the first half of this book. Stuff just keeps happening to them and they have absolutely no control over it. No, Hermione is, she is going to grab her destiny with both hands and steer it the way she wants. We see that with the hat. She's basically like, no, Gryffindor, this is where I want to be. So, how can you not like that? I can imagine that in real life, she might get to be a little bit much, but I like that Harry and Ron are friends with her, because otherwise I think this would be a really isolating experience for her. And so I think that part of the story is really cool.
And I don't think it would just be an isolating experience for her, but I think that in the end, Harry and Ron would probably be failing all their classes. You bring up the point of she's the girl in the front row, always raising her hands. But basically, if you think about it, after they became friends, she basically forced Harry and Ron to basically be that type of front row, at least be with her in the front row, so to speak. Because basically all three of them, I find, need to protect each other in some way, shape, or form. And not only is she protecting them by knowing things, being very studious, very smart, she's very quick on her feet much of the times to get things done. But one of the things is that after they after the situation with the troll, she basically, I think Hermione wound up being the glue of the trio, because not only is she more studious, she's able to actually guide the boys in a way that they won't go through and get too. Let me rephrase this. She guides the boys in a way that if it wasn't for her, they'd probably be expelled, to be quite honest. But she's the one that's setting teachers on fire. I mean, who doesn't want to set a teacher on fire at some point?
Well, it was really cool to see that rebel streak come out, because until then she was sort of this very two-dimensional character. So it was nice to see her rebel a little bit and, set a teacher on fire. Not that we're trying to teach kids to do that. Yeah.
I want to bring up one more overall presence in this book, which is an important presence that we have not spoke about once during this whole entire time. Dumbledore. Now, Dumbledore is basically the Lord of the Rings equivalent of Gandalf. He is the end-all, be-all of basically all that's supposedly good with wizard. What is your thoughts on Dumbledore, Alice?
Well, I think that's actually a really good analogy, because, like Gandalf, he dips in and out of the plot at key points. And there are points in the plot where you think, if Dumbledore were here, this would not be a problem. So while I understand that he is a presence in this book, and certainly in terms of creating the plot itself, I mean, he is the one who decided to drop Harry with the Dursleys, and that starts this tale. And so he has had this huge impact on Harry's life, both for good and for ill. He isn't really a day-to-day presence in the book or in these characters' lives. He is somebody who sort of goes off into, you could easily imagine, into a high tower somewhere, and steps out at key moments to provide guidance or help or save the day. So I'm sure we'll see more of him in the future, maybe learn more about who he is as a person. But right now, he's more of an idea than a fully fleshed character.
Angela?
So I found that I do agree that Dumbledore wasn't a fully fleshed out character, and he did kind of dip in and out at key moments of the plot. You know he's going to play a more key role later, you just don't know how. He seems like this great thing to the kids. I don't know what he can really do. He seems like a silly old man sometimes, but he's and like a lovable character, but not the powerful way that you know he should be or you hear him to be. So you don't get a good sense of that yet.
Just to wrap things up in regards to the books, into the book, what is your overall thought of the ending of the book? We'll start with Angela.
I thought the ending wrapped up really nicely. I remember talking years ago with a friend about the fact that rule breaking is sort of celebrated and rewarded at the end when they're giving out the house the points for the house cup. Sorry, I'm totally mixed up. When they're giving out the award and the points for the houses. But I thought that it was a great setup for more to come, because it feels like an ending, but it's not a true conclusion, because you don't know exactly where the Dark Lord has gone to. I thought it was a great setup for the series.
All right. And Alice?
Yeah, I have to agree with that. It's clear that these books were thought of as a series, and so this comes to a nice conclusion, and it has sort of a normal beat, if you will, at the end of the school year, and with people returning returning home from Hogwarts. But it's clear that this is a to be continued kind of an adventure. And I do think that it's interesting how while Hogwarts does have a lot of rules, it's not a bureaucracy in a form of, well, if you break the rules, it's always wrong. They actually do recognize that there is a higher purpose sometimes that causes you to have to break rules. So I hope that's a theme that we continue to see in the future books.
Because anarchy is rewarded. All right, I want to go through and thank Angela for taking the time out to talk with us about these books. And again, we're going to go through and get things squared away for season 2 when we go into Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Yeah, that's what I'm looking into with that. Because if the recording is quiet, I can always amplify it.
Okay, cool.
So that's less of an issue than the being able to hear so we have the conversation.
That's because you're a wizard, right?
Yes, that's because I'm a wizard.